How to get more motivation for flow. Flow foundations have three pillars: motivation, cognitive load, and biology. But the first question is, why foundations? Why not a million things? Not everything can be foundational, but the key thing is really that these three pieces are constantly in operation, constantly in the background. They're not tools, they're not hacks, they're not productivity tips. And when you have these three pieces in place, you experience more flow. What I mean by more flow is more frequent, easier to access, and deeper flow states. So in today's video, we're going to talk about motivation specifically. The first question to ask is the difference between intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic comes from within you, and extrinsic comes from outside of you. The carrot and the stick, for example. When it comes to intrinsic motivation, there's a big five for flow: curiosity, autonomy, mastery, passion, and purpose. They spell out the acronym CAMP with 2 P's. And each of these will be defined more specifically later. There's also additional examples like enjoyment, pride, knowledge, self-worth, just so you get the idea. In contrast, extrinsic motivation, for example, the carrots, money, anything that money can buy, material possessions, experiences, power, status, fame, prizes, or stick, consequences, deadlines, failure, are all extrinsic motivators. Motivation is a sliding scale. It's rarely binary. Generally, whatever we're doing is a mix of the two. There's a ratio. So it could be 100% intrinsic motivation or 100% extrinsic motivation, and everything that fits in between, 50-50 or any ratio possible. But if you want to experience more flow, you want to push that ratio closer to the intrinsic side over time. More fueled by intrinsic motivation means you'll get easier, deeper, and more frequent flow states over time. Now, this might mean some long-term changes. If you're in a job that you hate, it might take a while to go in a direction that you hate less or enjoy more. But that's the point. It's kind of a long-term thing. And one of the reasons that motivation is a foundational piece that's constantly in the background. And a quick note about extrinsic motivation. It's not all bad, especially at the start. I don't want to sound like extrinsic is terrible, intrinsic is the way to go. We all need money to live. Some things just suck. And having extrinsic motivators in there might be just what we need to get us off the couch and actually complete that task. And also, research shows that happiness and life satisfaction move together with income until a certain point. And that point is more or less the point where extrinsic motivation stops working. To give you a clear example, if someone is making $10,000 in a year, US, and then goes to $20,000 a year, US, that difference is huge, and it's going to have a crazy impact on their life. It's going to make them happier. It's going to get them access to better things, better lifestyle, more leverage, etc. In contrast to that, someone who is making $140,000 US versus someone who's making $150,000 US is not going to feel that same level of difference with that extra $10,000, even though it's the same amount. So extrinsic motivation is not bad, especially in the early days, especially at the start. That's what's going to skew your intrinsic versus extrinsic ratio. And again, this concept is just to build a useful model, something to be aware of and something to think about over the long term. in order to experience more flow in your life. Now, you're going to pause the video for a second. Just time to get a pen and paper out or open up Word or Notepad. There's no need to rewind the video at all. Everything will be done sequentially with you for this exercise. So when you're ready, hit resume. We're going to dive in. How do we experience more flow through motivation? We consider the big five only: curiosity, autonomy, mastery, passion, and purpose. Curiosity, a deep fascination and desire to learn more about your pursuits, the basic fuel to the fire of knowledge. And the more curiosities you address, the more likely you'll find intersections that will lead to things that you find that you're passionate about. And if you deepen your knowledge about your curiosities, that is what will build your skills towards mastery. Autonomy is having the freedom to make your own decisions about the choice, the style, and the type of pursuits that you do, as well as not being micromanaged, especially if you're in a 9-to-5. Mastery, a deep desire for and an ability to continuously improve at the activities within your pursuit. Note that it's not about reaching mastery. It's more about the path towards mastery is something that you feel great about. There's opportunity and you like that opportunity. Passion, pretty self-defined, intense desire or enthusiasm for the activities you're doing for their own sake. Purpose, when you have passions and activities you're pursuing that have an impact on something greater than yourself, something outside of you. It could be your field, could be your community, your city, your country, region, the whole world, poverty, social causes you care about, etc. So now the exercise. For each of the words below, rank your current or main pursuits on a scale of 0, the minimum, to 10, maximum. 5 is the perfect midpoint. And I'll put the definitions here while you do the exercise. Feel free to pause the video and I'll move on. Ready to move on? So how do we experience flow through motivation? Why did we go through that exercise? Well, for one, each piece of motivation stacks up on top of each other. And if they're pointed in the same direction, if they relate to the same activity, then the higher score on each piece, the higher your overall intrinsic motivation score. And now that we've kind of divided intrinsic motivation into these big 5 categories, we can easily identify what you've already got in place and what would be good for you to focus on in the long term. So in summary, today we've talked about the basic foundation of getting more flow being intrinsic motivation. We also introduced that motivation can be intrinsic or extrinsic, and it's all a relatively sliding scale. We also introduced the big 5 intrinsic motivators: curiosity, autonomy, mastery, passion, and purpose. And hopefully you did that exercise. Please do keep your baseline numbers. Those are really interesting, and we can see how those improve over time. Hope you found this video useful. I will see you in the next one.